Hey, beautiful friends. Today, I wanted to talk about this space of grief. So, grief comes in so many different angles, spaces, places of our life. But what I have come across recently was this concept of grieving a life, but grieving the life that we thought we were going to live, but didn't actually get to live. And so I want to kind of break this down because I've been processing it in different ways myself, because I think that it's pretty normal for us when we're younger to have this idea of what we think life is going to be like. And we have this vision of what that means to us or how that might articulate itself. And then we get into the human experience and we actually start to see the realities of those things. And in some cases, it can be really challenging when we have a life event that essentially flips our entire reality on its head and means that the plans that we had, what we thought we were going to be doing, sort of that, maybe your 5 year, 10-year plan, or even like in my case, it was built for building a family and having a wellness center and doing a lot of different things that I thought I was going to end up doing with someone that didn't end up that way. And so this has come out in so many different spaces where I've had to navigate how to restructure that life and the things that I still have available and possible to me, and the things that aren't possible for me anymore based on where I'm at in my life right now. Or if they are possible, they might not be possible in the same way, right? So I think that it's so important for us to actually sit with that and in a space of allowing ourselves to feel, what does it feel like to not have our reality match the vision in our head? And when we can start to dive into that, we can start to see, like, where does my grief sit? Maybe you don't have grief with it and maybe you do. I've just been walking that path and seeing it with a variety of clients recently, where it's like we're having to go through these mourning processes or these rituals that happen after a major transition, but one that really alters the foundation of your reality. So, the first time this happened to me, it was when I went to college right out of high school. I went to school for fine arts and education, and I thought I was going to be an art teacher and a professional artist. And that was my plan and my vision when I was a teenager and all through college. And then I graduated and saw the reality of how much money I would actually make as a teacher and how saturated the job market was and how much more I could make in the industry that I was already in at the time. And in doing that, it became very clear that my original plan was not actually even going to be viable. So then I had to go back to the drawing board that very first time to discern, like, what do I want to do in this space? And I don't regret any of those decisions that I've made along the way, but my life does not look like that at all. Like, I'm not an art teacher. I'm not even a teacher in the traditional sense of schooling, not for children. I was certified K through 12. I work now where I teach adults, and all of those, I guess I'll speak to that too. It's like all of the things that I learned in that space all have come in handy now, but I'm not using them the way I originally thought that I would. And so there was this space, even with that, where I had to really sit with, what does this mean for me? Because my identity was woven into that, and what I thought I was here to do and how I was going to articulate that also had to change. And so today I just really felt like, it's just about how can we actually lean into those things when life doesn't go according to our plan, right? I mean, this happens all the time on small scale, in small scale ways, right? So it's not always these huge life-changing ways. But I think that it really is also important to look at it from the perspective of, was the path I was trying to walk what I consciously wanted to lay for myself? Because even if I go back to the art degree that I chose to get, I wanted to actually go to a different college to just get a professional art degree and own that space and be in that space. But I had family who did have their own wisdom. They were pushing me to go into art school for teaching so that I could actually teach, because I was told as a child, artists, it's the starving artist adage, artists don't make money, that's not an actual career. So I had some supportive people in my life, but a lot of the people thought that being an artist was actually not a very intelligent choice for me to make. Some people in my life maybe even said, "Oh, honey, you're so smart. Why do you want to be an artist when you could do so many other things?" And I get that they didn't understand, but I also believed that they had some wisdom. And so I chose to do something that at that time wasn't actually aligned with what I really wanted to do. So, on some level, I wasn't surprised that it didn't actually work out for me to be an art teacher, because my heart wasn't in that. My heart has always been in being an artist, and then many of these other things, utilizing my innate gifts and skills, as well as weaving that into art and creativity, and how we can be expressive as souls and create and express our human experience through different mediums, right? So I guess this is just one example, and I can go into many other examples of how life gave me pivot points where I had opportunities to change my way to relate to myself and how I identified, and even the sense of vision for my life. Now, I will say that while it's drastically different, it's beautiful, but it's also beautiful now because I gave myself the chance and opportunity to actually grieve the vision that I had being gone and give myself space to create a new one, but now with more connection and less attachment to outcome. So I think that's one of the biggest sticky spots, is when we have these visions of how we think things are going to go and then they don't, but we were attached to that. Then we can have suffering, we can feel completely thrown off track, we can feel lost, we can feel alone, confused. And depending on who you have in your life and what you have for support, that can be really challenging. And so that's a huge piece of this too, is some of us, like for myself, the bigger transition I had to go through in end of 2019, beginning of 2020, I did predominantly on my own, because I didn't have the support there at the time, because other people made choices to not provide that support and be there to help me. And so within that space, I had to learn how to rally. And so I wasn't able to grieve right away. I had to go into, how am I going to take care of myself? How am I going to live? How am I going to eat? How am I going to restructure? I really had to get creative, because there was a lot of change and a lot of it was outside of my control. And so I didn't realize that I had been holding that vision, or that I even needed to grieve that vision of life not being the same, because I was too busy in a grief of, a partnership and a community and a business and a variety of other things that had also been happening, that I kind of want to talk about in other videos. But it was this really powerful place to see how I could be taken care of at each stage, and how I might not have known that there was grief at that initial stage. But when I did become aware of it in the last, year or so, it really hit me differently, where it was like, oh, okay, so I had this vision, and now that vision isn't going to be possible for me in the way that I thought it was going to be possible for me. But it doesn't mean that there isn't a beautiful, rich, and nourishing present and future. It just means that in order for us to get there, we have to be able to get right with everything we've already lived through, and to understand that these have all been experiences worked and designed to shape us. And so I just like to really support the expression of all emotions, and to just put that out there, because I imagine that there's other people who can relate to life taking a very big detour for you, and you having to learn how to make peace with or deal with. Maybe you're not even ready to make peace. Maybe it's just about processing the anger and the frustration and any other emotions that I did find that happened first. I had to process the intensity of all of these stages and transitions of life, because there's been many times where things haven't come into the vision, right? But I think when we have this bigger vision for, our lives and how we think our life is going to work and the structure of that, we can get really excited, and we can also put a lot of weight on that and then lose track of the grace and the presence and the beauty in the moment. And I know that I could have chosen to be really sad and depressed and stayed stuck in a space of like, well, I guess I don't get my dream life. I don't get, a family. I don't get to do these things. I don't get to have this practice in the way that I had hoped I would, or have a community around the way I thought. But the reality is all of that has actually refined itself. It has showed me so much clarity about what I do want in my life, and absolutely what I don't want in my life ever again. And it's taught me how to show up differently for myself in a way that allows me to both dream, but then to not be attached with it having to happen in this exact way with certain people in certain timing, and to really embrace that, like, I know that I will be fulfilled. I just might not know what that fulfillment looks like on every level. And day to day, I can be with what's here and dream a new dream and build a new reality. And that's something that each of us can do when we're allowing ourselves to be honest with what we're feeling, honest with, whether we're angry, whether we're in grief, whether we need a change, whether we're not even sure what we need, right? And so I just guess I wanted to touch a little bit on the topic of grief today and see where you guys are on your grief scale. And so maybe it's, you have a different version. And if you feel called to share, please drop in the comments, or, direct message or email and share with me if you feel so called to. Otherwise, just know I'm holding space for my grief, for your grief, for our collective grief, of which there is a lot right now. And so even that, like, we can all stand to grieve a little for what's going on in our country right now, in terms of the amount of people that have been hurt, that are currently still being hurt. And it's just, we have a collective that's saturated in grief, and I'm feeling it coming up to the surface. And so I'm going to keep talking about it in the ways that it's resonating from day to day, and holding that space that we can move through this individual and collective grief with grace and as a team.